Well, here we go, my friends. How's it going tonight? I suppose I should start with the trigger warning. If you don't want to hear about politics, if you don't want to hear about police, or you don't want to hear about the current situation, you can turn the video off now. That's only a half joke, because I know there are a lot of people out there who say, I came to your channel for this or for that. I've been hearing that for the last 10 years. I've talked about everything from cannabis to kratom to cameras to crackheads to, you name it. I pretty much hit it. I've made 4,000 videos. And there are only a handful of times in history where something important enough has happened to grasp my attention. Not for lack of it being an important issue. A lot of important things have happened in these years. But I only talk about a subject when it has affected me personally or when I feel it is a major injustice. This particular one with the police is near and dear to my heart because of my own experiences with cops, but also for the others who have suffered worse than I have. Beyond statistics, beyond black on black, white on white, black on white crime, the police force is corrupt. It is dirty from the inside out and needs to be completely overhauled. So in this video, I'm going to give my argument for why I believe we should defund the police departments around the country. And not just talking out my ass, explaining why I think this is important and exactly what that means. Because it does not mean we eliminate police completely. I am all for police working cases of robberies, crimes, murders, especially when they have good training and they're well respected. So, you might remember back in 1992, it was after April, when the big riots happened in late April into May. Well, in May sometime, it was Rodney King who got his ass kicked by cops, one of the first, filmings of a actual real beating by the police that was taken seriously. Rodney King came out and he said, "Can't we all just get along?" And the answer to that was nope. We tried. People have been trying for a long time. The fact is, since then, people have become even more angry with the police. The police have become more militarized, and it seems like things have not gotten better. And so, yeah, it's a little bit personal, and I think that the communities that have dealt with this understand why it's important and why so many people are standing in the streets. Because it goes way beyond just police. It's the prison system, and I'll get into that. But, the media has really made this difficult because at the beginning they started just covering, of course, looting, riots. That's what the media has done for decades. And I think that's changed after the first Saturday when the CNN reporter was arrested on air for doing his job with a press pass. And then all of a sudden journalists started getting punched, shot at, with rubber bullets, with tear gas. And as you all know, or most of you probably, I've got plenty of tear gas launched right at me from the cops when I was filming in Portland on the 2nd, July 2nd, or June 2nd, sorry. And so anyhow, the media is covering this a little more closely now, the police abuse factor. And the interesting thing is that over the past week and a half, police abuse has become more apparent to the average American than it ever was before. People who weren't paying attention are all of a sudden watching videos of beating after beating, harassment after harassment, thinking, man, shit, maybe things are worse than I thought they were. Maybe just because I have that privilege, and I'm not talking about white privilege, I'm talking about any privilege. If you're born with money, if you're born with the right color, in the right neighborhood, the right situation, if you have enough money, you can buy your way out of anything. But the average person who lives in the ghetto, who is colored, who is black, I should say, or Hispanic, is generally treated much worse by the police. And this is statistically true. And people have been arguing this for too long. And it's just, I don't understand when you hear police saying it themselves, why we can't just admit that there is an inherent racial bias within the policing system. And over the past 20 years, the police television programs and movies have made it so much worse. Law and Order, shows like that. Now really think about this for a minute. These are dozens of police shows and movies. And what is the one defining factor that connects all of these shows? The police break the rules and they get away with it. They have trained us to think it's okay for cops to break the constitutional laws that allow us to do what we need to do. And if you're sitting at home saying, oh, well, that's what you have to do to get drug dealers when they don't play by the rules, those are the same legitimacies that people use for gassing peaceful protesters to allow the president to go do a photo op with a Bible. And, we are way beyond civility here. I understand that people are upset. I understand that people have their own opinions, and they're screaming and ranting that all these liberals are standing in the streets, and all these damn liberals, look at them. There was one guy that came out with a chainsaw threatening these people, saying, go home, go home. Some people just cannot comprehend the fact that other Americans have a civil right and a civil obligation to speak up against tyranny in their own country. I think that a thing that's overlooked quite often is that police have immunity. They have immunity from damage. They have immunity from being harassed or being charged on certain things. This is one of the things that has to change. We don't have to get rid of cops. We just need to get rid of their immunity. And, I don't understand why people are willing to accept fascism and why they are willing to take on a cult-like atmosphere about politics. But I also realize that it's because a lot of people don't think. And when I say that, I mean it wholeheartedly. I know that people take offense to that. A lot of folks say, well, I think this way because that's how I think, and I do think, and I'm a deep thinker. And, it's one of those, it's not about just thinking or being smart or intelligent. It's about looking at all the statistics and facts, letting down your ego, letting down your guard and saying, maybe I was wrong about something and it's okay to admit that. I have fucked up so many times in the past about things I thought were true. But if I make a bold claim about something, like Antifa is doing this or doing that, you know how much hate I got for the video I made about the Antifa bricks. But you might notice that not one person on that video, maybe one or two, refuted it. And not one person at all gave me an explanation of why it was a fact. I mean, you can give YouTube links all day long to other videos about the same thing, but it's not going to prove it. I've found that people don't give a shit to look at facts. And video doesn't lie. So here we are in the modern day where it's not just the media, because for the last few years people have been screaming, the media's lying, oh, it's just all fake news. Now every single person has a camera. It's being posted on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere by people. I mean, are we going to say that every single protester is faking the videos that they have and that somehow it's a giant conspiracy? The cops are brutal. It's obvious what we've seen. Pepper spraying crowds that are nonviolent, tear gassing crowds that are nonviolent, beating people with batons and punching people who are sitting down. If you can't see that as fascism, how can you call yourself an American? They don't tolerate that shit in Europe. Why should we tolerate it here? I don't understand people who believe in this strongman attitude, that we need a great president who's going to tell us what to do, and that we don't have to think for ourselves anymore. We don't need to do anything. We could just read Twitter, find out what's going on, or watch Fox News. And if that sounds biased, it is, because I have no problem admitting that I tend to lean liberal. Everybody knows that if they know my channel. But, when people say that, oh, you liberals, you're just anti-cop and these people are criminals, and I'd say, a lot of people are criminals. But how can you justify emptying a clip into somebody who is running with their back turned to you? How can you justify a no-knock warrant going into somebody's house and shooting them 8 times in bed? I would urge anybody to justify either one of those cases. If I'm not mistaken, it was Tamir Rice that was shot in the back, and it was Breonna Taylor, I think, that was shot in her bed. Correct me if I'm wrong. Those cases, these are the cases that happen all the time. And I am disgusted by the way the police operate. And people say, well, accidents happen. No, it's not acceptable. It's absolutely not acceptable to do things like that. And in many cases, the police do not need their guns. In the case of Breonna, she actually was a nurse that had been helping COVID patients, and the warrant was for drugs that may have been delivered to her house for somebody else. The warrant was for a different person who didn't live there, who was already in police custody in jail, and they knew that, but they still executed the warrant and killed her. I only point out these specific cases because they disgust me. The fact that cops can do this, that they can get away with these things. And all of a sudden, over the last week, a bunch of cops have been charged for things. What do you know? The people are speaking out. So I'm a little bit disgusted with my fellow man who can't see how many people are standing in the streets. Considering a month ago, there were a bunch of gun-toting right-wingers standing at capitals, in their state capitals, saying, we're protesting for our right to not wear a mask. Dude, I totally support that. That is your right as an American. So why can't you stand with us? If you're one of those gun-toting right-wingers, and I'm not saying that as an insult, why can't you stand with the people? Why can't you stand with your neighbors? If it's not a racist issue, then why can't we all stand together and say, yeah, the government is tyrannical? I've heard so many extremists say, the government's going to do this, they're going to take our guns, they're going to do that. So why is all of a sudden the current administration any different? Is it because it's Trump? And if not, then why? Why are we trusting the government right now? People only make it convenient for themselves and trust who they want to trust. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter who's the president. Nobody gives a shit about your interests. It's us, together. And I've thought about interviewing people who are right-wing minded because I really want to bridge that gap. I don't want to sit and argue about shit. I want to talk about what's important. I want to be able to find a common ground to realize that it's divide and conquer. And if you don't see that, then you're missing it. You're missing the whole point. I know a lot of folks are focused on looting and the broken windows and the crime. Have you heard of much of that in the last week? Most of the problems that have happened in the last week have been confrontations between police and protesters. And quite often the protesters are not violent. The police are trying to dominate. And that's because the president says dominate. This is the same president who said, while he was standing at the podium, verbatim, something to the effect of, well, when you're putting criminals in the car and you kind of put your hand over their head, to stop them from hitting their head. He says, you don't need to do that. He's like, basically they're robbers and murderers. Smash their head into the goddamn car. Trump is a strong man. He wants big police forces because a guy like him needs to protect his assets. He doesn't need to protect his own ass. So the reason I bring up the right-wingers is I say, aren't you the same people who say you can protect your own cities, your own towns, your own property, that you don't even need cops? If you've got a whole arsenal of AR-15s, why the hell do you need cops at all? You should be with us. You should be with the liberals, the SJWs, who are actually fighting for other people's rights. I just don't get it. If you want to know what defunding means, it means diverting those funds to other causes. It doesn't mean eliminating cops. You can still have police working robberies, as I said, but a lot of those funds can go to community efforts. And, we can have hope for change. It's not that we're stuck in this reality that we're in. We really can make change, and a lot of folks really are afraid. They think that it's too hard or it's not worth the effort. But for all the people who are standing up, at least take a look and see what's going on out there. History depends on whose history you believe. I'll admit, going to school, you will learn a whole bunch of bullshit. And once you get out, you'll think, I was lied to, and you'll start learning an alternative history, but then you'll find that you were lied to again, and it goes on and on. You have to be able to distinguish not what's true in the history, but what human character really is. And without trust in one another, we have nothing. You know, we have nothing without trusting our fellow neighbors. So, you want to know how much we spend on police each year? It's about $100 billion. I know people, I can't even comprehend money like that. It's 1/10 of $1 trillion. You know, it's a huge chunk of cash in this country. But the prison industrial complex is about another $80 billion last time I looked. $80 billion. That's about the same amount again just for prisoners. And you know what? A lot of those prisoners are in there for minor drug offenses, possession offenses, getting high. You know, if you put people in prison, you can collect money on them. And the average cost for a prisoner is around $35,000 a year. So if you arrest somebody, put them in prison for a couple of years, you're charging the taxpayers for that. Then they're losing their job and their houses. And when they get out, they have to go to a halfway house that has to be funded. Then they have to be on welfare and food stamps and pay the courts. Believe me, I've been through the court system. I've been on probation twice. I have 2 felonies, and I know exactly how it feels. They were both for consuming drugs, substances, marijuana and mushrooms, to be honest. And the cops treated me like a goddamn loser. No respect. Absolute assholes. You know, I mean, it disgusts me, the things they get away with and the way they talk to people. It's about the cost per cop is about $150,000 per officer to have them on the streets. And I think, you know, what am I getting for that? What are any of us getting for this? And on top of that, $250 million a year is paid out in settlements from the top 10 cities, the 10 biggest cities. $250 million. Huge chunk of cash paid out to people who get screwed over and wronged by the cops. So we have the cost of the cops, the cost of the jails, and the cost of the settlements. And you think, could we do something better with it? They even have brutality bonds, as they call it in the cop world. Brutality bonds are basically these, you know, ways of buying your way out, assuming you're going to get sued. And it goes so deep, it's really hard to even talk about sometimes. You know, I guess civil forfeiture, if you want to talk about looting, and people want to cover, well, looting, which hasn't happened much in the last week at all. Looting is basically civil forfeiture, which is what cops do when they pull you over and take everything you have. Or come into your house and take everything you have. And yes, this has happened to me. They took everything I owned and never got it back. And as far as I'm concerned, that's robbery. And they scare people into taking plea bargains for things they never did and convince you that basically they want to dominate the people. And that's exactly what the government is encouraging. So I say, use this opportunity to stand up for your fellow man, whoever it may be, whoever you may be, and actually stand together and fight this injustice. It sounds cheesy to say it, but it's true. This has been going on for a long time. In the 50s and 60s, when cops were fire hosing, that was on a nice day, they were fire hosing black protesters. On a bad day, they were shooting them down, gunning them down. Things have changed. But non-lethal rounds are not lethal. 15% of people, up to 15% of people who get hit by non-lethal rounds can still be hospitalized. You get hit by a goddamn rubber bullet in the face and you'll remember it. And they've been shooting press like they're nothing. That's the world we're living in now. We're living in an America where the press and innocent, peaceful protesters are being shot by their fucking government. And on top of that, now that's understandable. There's plenty of tyrannical, oppressive governments out there. But the fact that people on the right support it, and they say, go Trump, get those liberals, you should be fucking ashamed of yourselves. The First Amendment. This is the greatest affront to the First Amendment I've ever seen in my lifetime. To be able to silence, arrest, shoot at reporters, to knock down peaceful protesters. And you may be able to focus on the few people who are causing problems or hurting this guy or that guy. I've heard every story. You know how I feel. But if you want to focus on that, you're missing the point. There are plenty of people silencing free speech right now, and that is the First Amendment right that we have. And tyranny can only be met with rebellion and civil disobedience. Which brings us back to the riot. It was, somebody mentioned a while back to me that, oh, but MLK was peaceful. And I told him, no, that's the white man's version of MLK. He said, the riot is the voice of the unheard. There's more to that, but the riot is the voice of the unheard. When people don't feel like they're listened to or part of their community, they riot. They stand up and they fight and they break shit. And you know what? I totally understand that. I really do. Does it mean I like riots or I like destruction? No. I mean, maybe a little bit, but that's not the point. The point being that most people don't want to destroy their own neighborhoods. And on top of that, there's a lot of setups. There's a lot of people out there causing problems just to make others look bad. And there is so much misunderstandings and confusion that it's hard to know who stands for what. But we can know that millions of people around the world standing in the street stand for something. And maybe you should listen to their voices. Whether you're a politician or a cop or somebody who thinks all liberals are just idiots, because we're not. There have been a lot of war crimes committed against people who are using civil disobedience to express themselves in this country. Tear gas is banned in international warfare, as well as a lot of non-lethal methods. The things that cops have been doing to people are disgusting. And they're basically a bunch of fascist fucking pricks. And anybody who supports them, I feel, is kind of in the same boat. And the people are not going to tolerate it anymore. You know, if I wasn't pissed off before, this last week has just really set it in stone. I know the media is biased, but in today's world, with all the coverage and all the different live casts, you can't deny what the cops are doing to the people. And so welcome to 2020, people, right? It's the year of law and order. And I feel like I have to speak out. I can't help it. I don't believe this is a good versus evil thing. But a lot of people I've met on the right do. I've heard them say it. This is good versus evil, you know. These people are evil. They're evil. No, nobody's fucking evil. People just want to live in harmony. And if you can't understand that, you're missing the whole point of life. The whole point of having a nation is harmony. If you can't live with your neighbor, then you're not a patriot. That's the point. And, you know, when democracy is in danger, we have an obligation to speak out, to fight back. And, you know, in a lot of cases, I've seen the cops just stand around allowing a lot of looting and destruction. They're more focused on the people they can get easily, and shooting people and breaking windows out of cars and tasing people randomly running away. I just don't get it. I get it. It's a power trip, but I don't understand how they can still continue to do that, knowing it's just going to make it worse for them. It's making their job less and less relevant when they are the ones that are committing the crimes, when they are the ones that are the thugs. And on top of that, they're smiling doing it. And don't tell me they're not. I've seen a whole shitload of videos of cops smiling at protesters as they're beating their asses. And macing people over the tops of crowds for no reason. Macing people out of their cars as they're driving by when people are walking down the street. Cops are out of control. This is nothing new, but the internet has definitely made it more available to people. And I'll be honest, I've never called the cops in my life. I probably won't need to, and I probably wouldn't want to. My wife had her car stolen once, and we called them, and they came over and basically told us, yeah, there's nothing they can do anyway. And I already knew that, but we had to report it. Don't care for cops. They've never helped me in any way, shape, or form. And I feel like anybody who is, let's just say, call themselves a patriot, who say we need police, I'd say, if you're standing there with a gun and an ammo vest, why do you need cops around? Why are you standing on that side? You should be with us. Use that tax dollar, those tax dollars in your neighborhood, in your community. There are a lot of poor white communities too. This isn't just about blacks. This is about all communities and all people. And it's like kind of like, you know, when you're talking about cops, it's like, well, you know, they're all a bunch of murderers, but I assume some are good people. And I'm sure you know where that came from, of course, when Trump was talking about immigrants who, make up a lot of the, prisoners as well. But we look like idiots to each other. We look like idiots internationally. Other countries are just laughing their ass off, not at the liberals in this country, but at the right-wing morons who want to fight against their neighbors. And plenty of people on the extreme left that are the same way. So, there are a lot more of us in the liberal category, as you can see. I know people might disagree, but I would say that maybe there's a lot more of us that are willing to stand in the streets and actually do something. I've never seen a protest like this in my life. I've never seen a movement like this in my life. And guess what? We all want the same thing, police reform. So hopefully the neighbors can stand next to us, even those who may disagree. And I know racism is inherent within this country, and a lot of people still deny it. But I'd like to just say, we're never going to get rid of racism. And we also shouldn't deny that it's kind of within all of us. We're born with these suspicions of people, not just for their race, but for their looks, for their height, for their sex, for their hair color. We have a lot of predisposed notions about who people are, and it's up to us to be intelligent enough to break away from that. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you all next time. This wasn't meant to divide, but to bring people together, and I'm hoping that I can interview some people who are, let's just say, extremely right-wing minded, who aren't going to commit ad hominem attacks on me personally, who can actually talk about subjects and say, why do you feel this way? Why do you believe this? Why do you think this? And how can we all bridge the gap? Because if we're going to survive as a country, we're going to have to figure it out. Take care, my friends.